Okay, let's dive into the fascinating and, frankly, high-stakes world of Formula One. Specifically, the massive shakeup heading our way in 2026, completely new power units, a radically different chassis concept. Naturally, this gets everyone talking about who might be poised to dominate, and well, one name keeps coming up, doesn't it? Mercedes. The team synonymous with success in the hybrid era often tipped for a return to that kind of form, much like they did when the current engine rules landed back in 2014.
Yeah, that's absolutely the narrative you hear circulating around the paddock. I mean, on the face of it, with their incredible track record and their, undisputed expertise on the power unit side, they seem like the logical frontrunners for 2026.
But here's where this deep dive gets really interesting. We're not just riding the wave of hype, we're unpacking why, despite all that built in optimism and their proven engine excellence, there are actually some pretty worrying signs from their current 2025 season. Signs that are throwing a serious question mark over that favorite status for 2026.
hmm We've been looking into source material, including analysis from a well-regarded F1 blog that really digs into these challenges they're facing right now.
So, our mission today is to cut through the speculation and understand the specific, frustratingly familiar problems Mercedes is grappling with in this very season. Are they just temporary speed bumps they'll iron out? Or, as the analysis suggests, is there evidence of a deeper, more fundamental weakness in their approach or understanding, something that even a massive rule change might not automatically fix?
Let's open up those sources and see what they reveal.
Absolutely. So let's start with the foundation of the optimism, the promise of 2026. The main reason Mercedes is circled as a potential favorite is those brand new power unit regulations coming in. We all remember 2014 vividly, right? They didn't just win, they absolutely nailed the start of the V6 turbo hybrid era in a way nobody else did.
And that history is key. That success, combined with their established excellence at their engine facility, the development work they've done for years, that's the fuel for the paddock whispers. There's genuinely exciting chatter behind the scenes about the performance numbers their development work on the new engines is reportedly showing.
Right. The thinking goes, if you have the strongest engine and you are the works team, you possess the maximum potential for seamless integration between that engine and the chassis. It's not just about power, it's how they work together. So if the Mercedes engine is truly the top dog for 2026, the team should, by extension, be the best.
And for the purposes of this deep dive, the analysis we're looking at essentially assumes that. Let's grant them that their 2026 power unit is the strongest. Though it's important context that a repeat of the scale of their 2014 engine advantage is seen as, well, pretty unlikely in the current competitive climate. But even if the engine is amazing, the critical billion-dollar question becomes, can the car package actually extract its full potential?
And this is where the central conflict lies, according to the sources. While the engine department might be firing on all cylinders for 2026, the car side, the aerodynamic platform, the chassis dynamics, that's where they are showing significant, persistent weaknesses. You only have to look at the raw numbers since the ground effect regulations came in back in 2022.
It's a truly staggering contrast. Before 2022, over 8 seasons, they were the definition of dominance, winning 15 out of a possible 16 drivers and constructors championships. Just incredible. Since the new rules were introduced, they've managed just 5 wins out of 77 races. That's a monumental drop-off.
Let's trace that struggle because it helps illuminate the current problems. In 2022, they immediately ran into major issues. Bouncing, porpoising, remember how dramatic that looked?
Absolutely. And their chosen path, that much-debated zero-side pod design, was an ambitious attempt to expose maximum floor area to generate ground effect downforce. The analysis points out they believe their simulation tools promise huge numbers from that.
But the Sims totally missed the bouncing problem, and the constant talk of needing to unlock that theoretical potential turned out, well, in hindsight, to be something of a fool's errand, according to the sources. The car's suspension geometry also played a role, didn't it? Forcing them to run a very low, very stiff ride height just to manage the floor.
Exactly, which only made the bouncing worse and really limited their setup options.
Then came 2023. The frustrating reality was that the W14 carried over a lot of that difficult DNA from the 2022 car. As one technical analysis put it, a lot of the DNA of the previous year's car carried over, and it just didn't work from the start. After a difficult opening weekend, the talk quickly turned to, fundamental change.
They started moving towards a more conventional concept. The zero side pods were visually the big change when they finally arrived with an upgrade package in May. Though, the team insisted the original concept wasn't fundamentally flawed. The analysis highlights that the real impact from those upgrades came from changes happening under the car, the underfloor, brake ducts, front wing changes, and that the full realization of this new direction was actually intended for the 2024 car.
Which brings us to last year, 2024. They did deliver on that promised shift with the W15, but it didn't magically fix everything, did it? They developed new problems, particularly with rear instability. This was despite the flexibility gained from moving the cockpit rearward, which was made possible by adopting a more conventional side pod layout.
Yeah, the car was tricky, until a specific upgrade seemed to help. A flexible front wing appeared on George Russell's car for the 8th race in Monaco,
Ah, yes, the flexi wing.
and that seemed to be a turning point for stability. The way it worked, flexing under load, allowed the front wing to generate good downforce at low speed, helping turn in, but then backing off at high speed, making the rear feel more planted.
And that coincided with their strongest period under these regulations, a remarkable 3 wins in 4 races between the Austrian and Belgian Grand Prix. They also looked dominant in Las Vegas at the end of the season, likely benefiting significantly from the cooler ambient temperatures there.
But as the analysis points out, that form was erratic overall. The core issues seem to be ongoing weaknesses in their simulation models, particularly when trying to predict how the car would behave in warmer conditions. They were clearly much stronger when temperatures were lower.
And now, here we are in 2025. The narrative going into the season was they've finally understood it, and early signs were genuinely promising. The W16 initially looked like a much better behaved car on track. George Russell had a fantastic start, scoring 4 podium finishes in the first 6 races statistically, their best start to a season in the ground effect era.
But frustratingly, it wasn't long before that Achilles heel returned. They started struggling badly with the tires when the temperatures rose. As team principal Toto Wolff himself has put it, they hit the bump in the road when temperatures rose. That's pretty direct.
Yeah, that made for really difficult weekends in places like Saudi Arabia and Miami, and then again during the recent triple header stretch through Imola, Monaco, and Barcelona, despite some brief moments of pace.
And what's truly telling from the analysis, based on Wolff's own words, is he describes this temperature sensitivity problem as being part of the car's intrinsic DNA.
Hmm.
And more concerningly, he admits the team doesn't really understand why it's happening. That lack of fundamental understanding is a major red flag, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's one thing to have a problem, it's another to not understand the root cause after so long. Adding a specific, slightly technical, but very illustrative detail from the sources. At the Imola race, they introduced a rear suspension geometry change. This involved tweaking an inner pickup point for the top wishbone forward leg, reportedly lowering it by maybe 25 to 30 millimeters. Sounds like a minor adjustment, right?
It does on paper.
Yeah.
But both drivers immediately struggled for confidence with it. The car was unpredictable, so much so that the team had to park that suspension change for the very next race in Spain. Now, perhaps its removal wasn't the only reason for their slightly better performance in Spain. But the fact that such a seemingly small geometry change caused significant driver confidence issues and had to be abandoned, well, it suggests that they don't fully grasp the intricate cause and effect of their own suspension kinematics and how it interacts with the aero platform. It needs refinement, or maybe it wasn't the right direction at all.
So when you connect the dots here, the consistent struggles with tire temperatures, the admission of not understanding why it's happening, the difficulty even with minor setup tweaks like the suspension change, it all points to a core problem. While Mercedes clearly has a decent grasp of these ground effect cars, they seem to lack the depth of fundamental knowledge, especially, and perhaps painfully, compared to their customer team, McLaren.
That is the truly critical contrast highlighted by the analysis. McLaren isn't just competitive. They are the runaway championship leaders right now, and they are a Mercedes power unit customer. Yet they are clearly demonstrating a far deeper understanding of how to make these complex ground effect cars perform consistently and effectively across different conditions.
And the analysis pinpoints exactly where Mercedes' understanding seems weakest. Those persistent tire troubles. Whether the issue is tied to the cooling regime, the suspension kinematics we just mentioned, or some other complex factor influencing tire performance in varying temperatures, they just don't seem to have the answer.
The consequence of that lack of depth is clear. Mercedes has been, as the source puts it, thereabouts at best, and at worst, well off the pace. They're inconsistent, and they urgently need to close that knowledge gap if they hope to compete at the front consistently.
Okay, this raises a really logical question that many of you listening might be asking. If 2026 is such a massive reset, a completely clean sheet of paper where almost nothing carries over, and they're clearly struggling with fundamental understanding now, Why don't they just effectively write off the rest of 2025 and throw every single resource solely at 2026 development?
Yeah, it's a tempting thought, isn't it? But the analysis explains why it's not that simple, or even wise. Yes, 2026 is a clean sheet. The rules are specifically designed to reduce the reliance on extreme underfloor downforce, meaning cars shouldn't need to run quite as close to the ground, which should hopefully reduce the bouncing and porpoising issues that plagued everyone early in this era. The goal is also for cars with more predictable balance, less low-speed understeer and high-speed oversteer.
And you could argue that this moves the design challenge away from some of the specific areas where Mercedes has consistently struggled over the last few years.
You could. However, and this is crucial, there is absolutely no guarantee that this rule change will magically solve Mercedes's fundamental understanding issues. Formula One history is littered with examples of the law of unintended consequences. The regulatory changes might aim for certain outcomes, but there's no certainty that the 2026 cars will behave exactly as the rulemakers intend. They will present entirely new challenges.
And the absolutely critical point from the analysis, the reason they can't just ignore 2025, is that their high-temperature struggles right now are undeniable proof. Proof that they don't fully understand something fundamental about how their car interacts with the tires and the ambient environment. To simply shrug and assume that this underlying knowledge gap won't matter in 2026 just because the rules are different would be incredibly negligent, wouldn't it?
Precisely. This lack of deep understanding of car dynamics, particularly tire interaction and temperature sensitivity, is the big concern. That's exactly why they must continue to push and learn using the current 2025 car. They need to sharpen their fundamental understanding of any Formula One car's dynamics now. To feed that absolutely crucial knowledge and methodology into the design and simulation tools for the 2026 machine. Remember, in 2014, Mercedes didn't just have a great engine, they also designed a very effective car package around it. There's no guarantee they can replicate that crucial car design success this time if they don't fix their current knowledge deficits. And the competitive landscape adds another layer of pressure. We've talked about McLaren's current dominance. They are a customer team, but one with a very close working relationship with Mercedes' engine facility in Brixworth. And it's clear from the track performance that McLaren is currently operating with a far deeper level of detailed understanding of what makes these cars work than the Mercedes factory team itself.
So the obvious question arises. Why shouldn't McLaren, with their evident grasp of car dynamics, continue to be the leading Mercedes-powered team again in 2026?
Exactly, and it's not only McLaren. Another Mercedes customer, Williams, is clearly on the rise and could pose a significant threat if they take another step forward next year. And their new engine partner for 2026, Alpine, is also anticipating a big reset and hoping for a major step themselves.
This brings it right back to the works team. If Mercedes continues to struggle with understanding the fundamental nuances of its car's behavior, especially ensuring it doesn't have that critical weakness in warmer conditions, there's a very real possibility they won't be the fastest car running their own engine next year. And that's why the remaining races of 2025 aren't just about race results on Sundays. They're absolutely vital for Mercedes to hone their understanding and build a robust foundation for 2026.
On the driver front, they do have some potential strengths. George Russell is having a strong 2025 season, performing consistently well and clearly demonstrating he has the capability to be a lead driver. He's expected to sign a new contract, confirming his position.
Alongside him is the highly rated 18-year-old Kimi Antonelli. He was promoted earlier than perhaps initially planned following Lewis Hamilton's move. And while he's shown flashes, like that sprint pole in Miami, the analysis notes he hasn't consistently delivered the outright searing speed often expected at this level just yet.
Yeah, the feeling is that the speed will come with experience, but he still has more to find, especially after a challenging recent run of races. So Mercedes could have a very strong blend of youth and experience in their driver lineup for 2026 if, and it's a big if, they can give them a consistently winning car. But the evidence from 2025, those persistent underlying issues, suggests they have significant work to do on the car side before that's a guarantee. New parts are still arriving on the car, like we saw recently in Montreal, which shows they are still pushing to learn, which is good.
Right, they're not standing still, but it reinforces the analysis's conclusion. Mercedes simply cannot afford to be complacent and assume the 2026 rule changes are an automatic get-out-of-jail-free card that will magically transport them back to the glory days.
It's all about whether they can develop that deep, fundamental understanding of car dynamics now. That seems to be the core message.
So, pulling all this together, what's the key takeaway for you, the listener, looking ahead to the huge reset in 2026?
Well, I think it boils down to this core tension. Mercedes undeniably has massive potential on the engine side for 2026, building on their historical strength and current development work. That seems pretty solid. But their recurring inability to consistently make their current car work effectively across varying conditions in 2025. Coupled with team principal Toto Wolff's remarkable admission that they lack a deep understanding of why these problems are happening, that represents a significant self-identified hurdle.
And it absolutely underscores that the remainder of the 2025 season isn't just about scoring points, it is mission critical for Mercedes. They must use these remaining races to sharpen their understanding of fundamental car and tire dynamics, to properly inform and optimize their design and simulation tools for that absolutely crucial 2026 machine.
So here's a final thought for you to maybe chew on as we look towards the future. Given that Mercedes still openly struggles to understand the fundamental intrinsic DNA of a car concept they've been refining under relatively stable rules for 3 years. How confident can they truly be that they will instantaneously grasp the infinitely complex dynamics of a completely new car concept under brand new rules from the very first test day in 2026? Could that same law of unintended consequences, combined with their current knowledge gap, potentially hit them harder than rivals like McLaren, who seem to have a much deeper, more robust handle on overall car dynamics right now?
A truly fascinating question, and one that will likely define their next few seasons in Formula One. We'll certainly be watching closely to see how they navigate this challenge.